Jeremy Soule has very much represented the sound of the Elder Scrolls series. He began work with Bethesda in 2002, hot off the heels of working on other fantasy RPGs, like Icewind Dale and Baldur's Gate: Dark Alliance. His soundtracks for Morrowind, Oblivion and Skyrim have solidly cemented their place in gaming history, largely because of their main themes and, seemingly undying memes. Oh god, I'm sick of Harvest Dawn. I hear it in my sleep, I swear. So, when a composer so ingrained in the sound of a series like The Elder Scrolls, it's difficult to imagine a world without Soule working in that series, and yet that is a world we live in. Todd and the gang will have to work without their award-winning composer for their next game, and while they have likely already chosen a composer for The Elder Scrolls 6, at least I hope they have by now, let's have a look at A. Why Jeremy Soule won't be coming back, B. Who Bethesda is most likely to choose, because it seems reasonably straightforward, and C. 3 additional names I think could do a great job as Mr. Soule's replacement, one of which you'll just have to have a bit of fun with because it's not the most realistic.
And if Aldwin's eternal, then eternity's done, for his story is over and the dragons are gone.
So, why isn't Jeremy Soule coming back to The Elder Scrolls 6? If you were trying to search his socials, you would find absolutely nothing. Everything has been scrubbed, and he has been inactive since 2019. This is because of a series of controversies surrounding the alleged SA of Natalie Lawhead, an indie game developer, and the harassment of vocalist Arale Brighton. It must be said that these remain allegations and accusations even 7 years later, as Jeremy Soule was never charged with the crimes. And I'm not here to play detective, judge or jury. I'm here to tell you what I know. But there's not a lot of information on the whole thing. As I said, there's no case to uncover, and ever since, Jeremy Soule has practically vanished off the face of the earth. So it's quite clear he won't be coming back for The Elder Scrolls 6 or quite frankly anything in any capacity. Materia Collective, a record label and music publisher specialising in game music, stopped working with Jeremy Soule, and after the accusations, a combination of his withdrawal from the public and the wider gaming scene shutting its doors means we probably won't ever see him again. Even before the accusations, there were signs that Bethesda wouldn't be working with Soule anyway. In January 2019, there was this article talking about how Bethesda hadn't contacted Soule about working on The Elder Scrolls 6, which he expressed on his Facebook page, although I don't have it here because the page no longer exists, because he scrubbed all of his socials. This seems to have stemmed from a bit of a falling out, with Soule expressing frustration at his work being used in a 2016 Skyrim concert, without his knowledge. Now, granted, in 2019, maybe Bethesda weren't ready to have a conversation about Elder Scrolls 6's music, given that Starfield was the studio's main focus at the time. I'm not sure when music enters the development process during Bethesda's pipeline. It could be during full development, or it could be during pre-production. If anyone has any sources about that, let me know. Although I would assume that music should have been one of the first considerations. While it's not really comparable because of the difference in studio size and the games that are being made, the indie developer Supergiant Games is known to have some musical pieces finished early on in development, which often helps build the tone of the games. And by early, I mean pre-production. The Transistor tone video, back when the game was titled Project Auden in 2012, is a good example, with Old Friends being a track that made it into the full release. So Soule's apparent falling out with Bethesda might have prevented him from being called up for The Elder Scrolls 6 even before the allegations came to light. Either way, he won't be there. So what about his most likely successor? Well, if I were a betting man, I would put my money on Inon.
Hello there, my name is Inon. I compose music for TV, movies, but more than anything else, video games.
Inon is a man with incredible variety and a long career in gaming music. He's actually worked on projects with Jeremy Soule before, such as Neverwinter Nights and Warhammer 40k Dawn of War, but this isn't why Inon is probably going to be the main composer of Elder Scrolls 6. Sure, he's worked on plenty of RPGs like Dragon Age, but he has also worked on quite a few Bethesda games, such as Fallout 3, 4, Starfield, and The Elder Scrolls Blades. While not strictly Bethesda made, Inon also worked on New Vegas, so it's clear that he's a name Todd's crew trusts. With Soule out, it's not like Bethesda really has to bring Inon in to work on Elder Scrolls 6, because he's kind of already there. They already have a working relationship, so this sort of seems like the easiest option to still get a quality composer in. Now, quite a few people, including me, were somewhat impressed by Starfield and Fallout's OSTs. To be fair, we're listening to the radio and Fallout more than anything else, let's be honest, so me not remembering anything from the Fallout soundtrack, except for the main theme, is because I was too busy singing about 60-Minute Men, Some Wanderers, and crawling through the Fallout. Strangely though, as mediocre as the rest of the game was, which prevented Mr. Soule from getting too much credit, the Blades OST, of all things, is pretty good. And I think that's what we should expect from him. It will be different from Jeremy Soule's work, of course, largely because his work was so distinctive, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I also want to say that I rate Inon's work highly. That Blades main theme is really good. And I also want to shout out his work with the Siberia series. Siberia, The World Before, specifically, is an incredible game that you should all try, with an incredible soundtrack to boot, which you can hear in the background here. And while it's a different genre of game, it's a very atmospheric OST that highlights some of Soule's strengths. Many of his songs have a strong sense of rising and swelling without sounding too heavy, which is important for an Elder Scrolls OST in my opinion, because Jeremy Soule's work is so iconic due to his atmospheric nature and lightness. It doesn't overpower you as you're walking around the provinces of Tamriel, taking away from the exploration and vistas. It's a calm component that doesn't scream for the spotlight, it complements everything. And while Soule will no doubt add his own twist, I think this element won't be lost. Soule also did work for the Prince of Persia series way back when, and is familiar with working with more exotic instruments. Well, exotic to Westerners anyway, such as the duduk, which I think is how you say it. Some of this could work well for the Elder Scrolls 6, especially if it's in Hammerfell, like we think it is. And see this video about what I think Elder Scrolls 6 will look like for more information on that. But this is all to say that I think Inon is a strong and worthy choice. He's not Jeremy Soule, and we have to accept that as a community, but I'm confident Soule will do well. Don't look too deeply into the Fallout and Starfield OSTs. The design briefs are obviously very different, and this man is versatile enough to basically do an OST for anything. But what if you're still a doubter, and want to look at some other names? Well, I've got you covered there too, because I'm going to elucidate you about some of the composers in the gaming music scene. So, Inon will more than likely take the mantle, but what if Bethesda wants to keep what he's doing with Fallout and Starfield separate? Unlikely, I know. But I want to talk about gaming composers, and this is my channel, so here we are. Still, we need some rules, or rather criteria. For one, we can't choose the more indie one-studio composers, ruling out the likes of Darren Korb, for instance, who I consider an utter genius. Every Supergiant Games OST is immaculate. Immaculate. You're hearing it in the background now. But we can't take him for the Elder Scrolls 6, especially since he's not the most well versed in working with orchestras or orchestral arrangements. He got some help from another name that we'll mention later, and actually that would be the second criterion. We need someone who can make an orchestral soundtrack, and hopefully someone who has some experience jumping right into a big IP partway through the series' run. Finally, and most obviously, they have to be good enough for the job. Who would have thunk? The number one hiring priority should be competence. It's not exactly rocket science. And I will of course talk about a lot of these composers' work to try and back up my choices. So, who is the first of my names? Well, that will be a man who seems to be a bit of a newcomer in the gaming space. Bear McCreary.
And they love it. And especially the beginning. They're like, the 3 notes in the beginning. And I was like, what 3? Oh, that thing?
Why have I chosen Bear McCreary? Well, I can see him working on something Elder Scrolls related in the future, specifically through Amazon Prime Video. He worked on the Rings of Power soundtrack, and while this show sucked and I'm not hearing it, it sucked. The music was actually really good. It shows that McCreary can work in a massive fantasy world and on an IP that other composers put their stamp on so strongly. Following Howard Shore is a nearly impossible task, and yet he did it. And if you've done that, you can follow Jeremy Soule. So this is why I can see McCreary being called up to work on a potential Elder Scrolls show, especially since streaming shows have been keeping this man very busy. It makes up a lot of his portfolio. But enough about shows. What about his gaming portfolio? It isn't as vast as Jeremy Soule's or Inon Zoule's, but that hasn't stopped him from making an impact. I mean, he was at the Game Awards with Hosier. And this comes from the God of War Norse Saga games, including the upcoming Laufey game. Now, when we're talking about music and Laufey, there's an obvious joke there. But YouTube copyright won't let me make it. I can still try, I guess. Oh god, what am I doing with my life? Anyway, Bear was still able to make a pretty iconic pair of soundtracks for both God of War games. An impressive feat, considering that the series already had a distinctive sound before his arrival. Now, I'm unsure if he'll do the quieter atmospheric tracks as well, which Skyrim in particular had in spades. Oh, Secunda, my beloved. But the epic boss battles will certainly get their time to shine. That Thor boss theme goes hard. Still, Bear McCreary might not be the strongest fit despite having the strongest name, even if he's an awesome composer. Everything he's done thus far has been heavily cinematic, which isn't something Bethesda games are known for. We don't get too many cutscenes in Skyrim, for instance, but if we got something like the Akatosh vs Dagon scene in the next Elder Scrolls in terms of scale and epicness, I'm sure McCreary could make a track that would more than fit. He might not be the most suited to the tracks for when you're just plodding about though, jumping up a mountain instead of using the intended path. Because you're determined to prove that jumping up the same rock is faster. No, this is quicker, this is how Todd wants us to play the game. Perhaps it's the Norse-inspired settings of both God of War and Skyrim that are making this work in my mind. But let's move on to, well, I don't want to say a joke entry, because that would be taking away from a very talented musician. But it's more of a fun entry, shall we say. Young Scrolls.
What is better, to be born Lokin, or to overcome your weaker nature through great effort?
If you're a fan of my channel and don't know who Young Scrolls is, I have to wonder, how did you get to me before them? There have been many great Scrolls tubers in the past, like the late Camelworks, Fudge Muppet, MXR Mods and so on, yet I actually think Young Scrolls is the greatest of the bunch. For context, they make memey Elder Scrolls songs using sound files of voice lines to make something truly magical. Now, you might be confused as to why I'm putting a YouTuber and SoundCloud artist in this list of heavy-hitting game composers, and, well, Young Scrolls proved they were more than just a meme machine with a certain mod, Lorcan. This mod rather bravely replaces the original soundtrack of Skyrim, something you would ordinarily consider a sacrilege. But I would implore you to listen to it. I'll leave a link to the full soundtrack below and you can hear it in the background now, but here it is cranked up a bit. There's something so wonderfully spiritual about this version of the OST, something beautifully haunting, and the chanting you hear quite commonly throughout the soundtrack makes it sound distinctly Nordic. It's a showcase of how great a musician Young Scrolls is when they take things seriously. Not that their memey stuff isn't great too, it's just that the nature of them make you laugh before you sit in awe. They also helped to make the soundtrack for the Siren Route mod, which, with its more Aelid setting, feels like it could have worked for Oblivion, specifically an Oblivion dungeon. The Solstheim sections of the Lorcan soundtrack also feel like they could fit in with Morrowind, showing that Young Scrolls here has quite a bit of variety, at least in terms of the kind of music they can make for different provinces of Tamriel. And a Maik the Lyre track also tells us that if Hammerfell is the location of ES6, Young Scrolls will be ready. Of course, I highly doubt Young Scrolls would actually be called upon by Bethesda, unless Todd feels like being a really cool guy. Do it if you're not a coward, Todd. But we will more than likely get something ES6 related by Young Scrolls, whether that be another meme video or a soundtrack mod. So that counts, right? To go from these meme videos to the Lorcan mod is a demonstration that Young Scrolls can really do it all. Well, as long as it's Elder Scrolls related. It is in the name. Anyway, I've had my fun. Now I'll answer the question of who I would pick if I were in Todd's shoes, and the man I would choose is Austin Wintory.
You're very kind. I assure you there's nothing there that's, witchcraft or something. It's all really simple.
First of all, Austin seems like a really cool guy, and we'll get into why that's relevant later, but his portfolio is one of the most varied I think I've seen in gaming. He has demonstrated that he can command an orchestra. He's done it live before for someone else's music, like when he got Ben Starr to sing a Baldur's Gate 3 track, which seems like a bizarre crossing of worlds.
But it's all been for naught. True souls that couldn't be bought. Doomed, detected, and caught.
And he was also called upon by Supergiant Games to do some orchestra-heavy tracks in both Hades games. Now, Supergiant Games, one of my favourite studios, is famous for having consistently great music, so the fact that these guys asked Austin to help them out shows you how much people in the gaming industry rate him. Plus, he knows Darren Korb and Ashley Beret, so maybe, just maybe, we could get those two to make an Elder Scrolls Bard song. That'd be cool. But what about Austin's own music? Well, atmospheric tracks are kind of a specialty of Austin. He did both Journey and Abzu's OSTs, meaning those relaxed tracks where you're exploring Tamriel will hit like they need to. Austin also did the Banner Saga soundtrack, which is awesome, and you can hear it in the background in this section. This soundtrack is what made me think Austin Wintory's work would suit the Elder Scrolls, since the OST probably could have worked for Skyrim, given the Nordic themes of both games and the strange melancholy of their OSTs. With Wintory's variety, I'm sure he could do a soundtrack for any province in Tamriel, and given that he did the Assassin's Creed Syndicate OST, with the track using the famous Ezio's Family's melody, he'll make a mean main theme with that Morrowind leitmotif we all know and love. And for some evidence, here's that Assassin's Creed track, so you get an idea of what I mean. Oh yeah, I can hear those Nerevar rising notes already. Now back to Austin being a cool guy. What Bethesda needs is a bit of good PR. It feels like everyone is just hate farming Bethesda now, which I can't really blame them for. Have you seen the views these guys are getting? This guy started 5 months ago, and look at those channel stats. It doesn't help that Bethesda have made themselves quite an easy target because they're A, not producing a lot to answer back, and B, have proven that they're not nearly as good as they used to be. But if you've got someone charismatic to put up there like Austin, someone who isn't afraid to show their face and is comfortable with public speaking, who is hard to hate, it could get people excited again, even if he's just talking about the soundtrack. Getting someone like Austin to talk about his soundtrack for The Elder Scrolls 6, if it happens, and how much it would help build the world, would at least get players excited for something. Obviously after we get another trailer of some kind. Plus he's relatively young, so hopefully he can actually live long enough to see his work in The Elder Scrolls 6. Hopefully. You know, I'm a lot younger than Austin, and even I think I'm not going to make it that far. We might need to give Todd Sanguinari Vampiris if he's going to see the project out.
Drank the blood of some people, but the people were on drugs, and now I'm a wizard.
All this is to say that Inon will more than likely take the reins for The Elder Scrolls 6's soundtrack, and while people are obviously sad that Jeremy Soule won't retain his role, I'm hoping this video will make you realise that others are more than up for the role. Inon is a great composer and could really shine with The Elder Scrolls 6 outside the Fallout and Starfield universes, especially Fallout's, where the composer usually gets outshone by the really catchy songs on the radio. Jingle jangle jungle, I'm so up in the jungle, I refuse to go. Where were we? Oh yeah. Now on the other hand, I'm under no illusion that we have lost something without Soule's involvement. Whether he's gone because of the fallout with Bethesda caused in 2016, or because of the allegations in 2019 is a bit of a mystery. But whatever the case, we are going to miss that soul magic. Still, we can get a new type of magic from someone else, and with a new province, hopefully outside the country Soule has already composed for, it can work if the composer is allowed the freedom to express their art in the game's tracks. That's the important part. Whoever is chosen doesn't feel creatively confined. If you don't have Jeremy Soule, it's no use trying to do the exact same thing without him there. Trying to capture a similar feeling is one thing, but trying to do exactly what he did without him will only result in an inferior copy. For an analogy, I think Will Smith's Aladdin in the live action is a good example. They tried to be too Robin Williams because of how good he was in the original cartoon, rather than letting Will Smith be Will Smith. Now, say what you want about Will Smith, and there is a lot to say and not a lot of it is good, but he is very charismatic behind the camera, and he has a certain brand of charisma, which I feel he was unable to bring to the live action Aladdin remake. Or rather, he was not allowed to bring. There's even a more hip-hop inspired version of Friend Like Me out there, something that fits Will Smith a lot more. I think DJ Khaled's in it as well, which is a very strange thing to say out loud, and this version in my opinion is far superior to the one we got in the actual live action film. If Bethesda pick Inon, they need to let him be Inon and express that in the OST, not have him try to copy Soule. Inspiration is one thing, but imitation is a big no. Young Scrolls understands this, and that's why the Lorcan mod is so good. Again, do check it out, and here's hoping that Bethesda understands this too.
And we have a group that pulled it off during the pandemic with the London Symphony Orchestra, which I always associate with these scores and movies that I've always loved. And seeing that and hearing it back, I find music is a very particular like time travel device.
Yeah.
Where it takes you back to those moments. And Skyrim's music has always been a part of its identity. We start with music. Usually the game we do concept art, we do interface, we do music.
That's interesting.
So even Starfield, one of the first things we did was the music.
Thank you for watching me glaze about some gaming composers. Or I should say, listening to me. You're probably on another screen as I speak, aren't you? Now, I've had to give it some structure, or else I'd be gushing about Darren Korb the entire time, but I do think the loss of Jeremy Soule, for possibly a few reasons, is ironically a sign of how things at Bethesda have changed. I say ironically because he didn't really leave to do something, like former Bethesda developers. If Bethesda can at least get the soundtrack right with a new composer, it will present a positive in the new direction the company has had to take, something we've not really had, at least since Microsoft flashed the cash and bought the place. Oh, we just need some hope, man, especially in 2026. Speaking of hope, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Do the whole YouTube ritual of liking, commenting and subscribing, and perhaps I shall see you in another video.
On the hill and in the valley, where the weeping flowers hide from the song of gentle mourning for the lost and lonesome bride. Now he roams through hill and valley, and the canyons open wide, singing songs of gentle mourning for his lost and lonesome bride, for his lost and lonesome bride.